I'd like to talk about a person named Shannon Arredondo. From what I can gather, her job involves placing evidence into a freezer or refrigerator and officially logging it. She follows this process for all evidence materials. According to the records, she booked the sheath into storage on November 16th. Now, keep in mind, November 16th is quite late if the goal was to retrieve DNA from a brass buccal snap. Brass contains copper, and copper destroys biological material. Anyway, what's particularly interesting is that Shannon's name appears again in connection with the sheath on December 7th. For some reason, she takes the sheath out of storage and about a minute later puts it right back in. I checked all the other evidence materials, and in no other case does Shannon handle the evidence again after her initial booking. So, what happened during that 1 minute? Was she asked to show the sheath to someone? Was she alone? All right, keep December 7th in mind. 2 days earlier, on December 5th, Bryan's name appears in a recent ISP lab report. I believe that showing his name may have been an error. In other parts of the document, Bryan's last name is misspelled. My theory is that the redaction software was instructed to remove the misspelled version of Kohberger, but since it didn't match the correctly spelled instance, that one slipped through. For those who have been following this case closely, you'll recall that the lab manager, lead investigators, and the prosecution all testified under oath that Bryan's name wasn't known until after December 19th. This document, however, directly contradicts that claim. On December 5th, Bryan's name appears and is cross-referenced with items 45, 46, and several others. When we look up what those items are, they all trace back to someone identified as Person E, who we know from previous court videos and documents is Bryan's father. According to this document, a buccal swab was actually done on Bryan's father in Pullman on December 5th. Boom. Wait, this is where things start to get very strange. We know that Bryan began his long drive back to Pennsylvania on December 13th, accompanied by his father. What I hadn't realized is that his father, Michael, appears to have been in Pullman as early as December 5th. The reason I believe this is because the source labeled E corresponds to Michael. If investigators had simply collected discarded trash from Michael's home in Pennsylvania, they wouldn't have been able to identify it as his since he lives with his wife and daughter and may have had male visitors. This suggests that Michael was in Pullman about a week before the cross-country trip. Once again, I find myself recalling Steve G's statements and, interestingly enough, starting to believe what he said.
Do you have any message for Kohberger's family?
Yeah, what do you want Kohberger to know?
We know when you flew out here. We know. We have your flight records.
So, what does all this mean? I want to reference a video that two of my friends made back in February. They focused on the wording surrounding whose DNA was found on the sheath. Their interpretation was that if you read the report scientifically and carefully, it points to the DNA belonging to Bryan's father, Michael, not Bryan himself.
We had another peep at the affidavit this morning. I want you to listen carefully to how this part is worded.
On December 27, 2022, Pennsylvania agents recovered the trash from the Kohberger family residence located in Albrightsville, Pennsylvania. That evidence was sent to the Idaho State Lab for testing. On December 28, 2022, the Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of suspect profile. At least 99.99% of the male population would be expected to be excluded from the possibility of being the suspect's biological father.
The Idaho State Lab reported that a DNA profile obtained from the trash and the DNA profile obtained from the sheath identified a male as not being excluded as the biological father of suspect profile.
So the trash in a sheath had DNA belonging to a male, that male being Bryan's dad. Yep, did you catch that? Both items had DNA from Bryan's dad. Both items matched to each other.
This is where the situation becomes even more complex. It starts to make sense why the prosecution and investigators testified that they didn't know Bryan's name until after December 19th. Acknowledging prior knowledge would have raised serious questions about the timeline and their handling of the case. According to the records, after a buccal swab was collected from Michael on December 5th, Shannon Arredondo briefly removed the sheath from storage before returning it a minute later. That sequence of events has led me to question why the sheath was accessed again, and what the purpose of that action was. These details raise broader concerns about evidence management and procedural transparency. It's important that an independent review be conducted to verify how the evidence was processed, who authorized each step, and whether all proper forensic protocols were followed. In my opinion, we can start by arresting Shannon Arredondo.